Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Arwin, Neil, 10th Man, the Adam Meakin, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello!
Shalom.
Yo, 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 yo.
Praise be to Allah. Any evidence of a physical...
Allah Akbar.
Any evidence of a physical... Right, let's get these
What's going on here?
random religious
I was
greetings
going
out
to
of the
say
way.
Must be with you.
I was going
Bacon
to say
and more
hi to
salami.
Armenian.
Bacon and more salami.
Welcome, salam. No.
Gotcha.
We all done with the religious greetings?
I think so.
Excellent.
But it is.
Hakuna
Oh, man.
Matata.
That's even better.
You say Hakuna Matata?
Yeah.
Very good. Means no worries.
The rest of your life.
Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge, that's a horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature.
L'chaim.
In English, if possible.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, impossible.
Go on, we're going to have a bit more enthusiasm about this question. It's asserted that there's a physical limitation to our view at the horizon, and that's Earth curve getting in the way of stuff. So you're telling me if I ask, although I do ask this on a daily basis, so increasing the enthusiasm level temporarily at the moment is not beyond my capabilities. But that is claimed to be Earth curve, right? The horizon.
Well, like I've said before, I wouldn't be on your show as a panel member if I actually have seen Earth curve.
But yeah, they claim
Not
both.
since Black Swan 2020.
That's what I was waiting for. Right on. If the Earth was a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, then every distance to that horizon, that would be Earth curve, could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That's the distance to the geometric horizon to block boats and buildings, aka Earth curve. However, in the Black Swan imagery, the horizon is beyond those geometric limitations of a sphere Earth radius 3959. Therefore, the horizon is not Earth curve.
Yeah, that's all great, and the math supports it. But just ask anybody, have they ever seen Earth curve? The answer is no. In fact, Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't see it at all. Even if you're 60,000 feet in the sky, you can't see it. So
He's lying.
Hold on.
He's lying because the horizon is claimed to be Earth curve in the heliocentric model.
We have a problem then, because my brother said to me yesterday, no matter what, even if Elon Musk or Bezos has said that he will bring anybody up in space to see the horizon, and you still will not believe.
Refracted and geometric, he's missing the word horizons, are not mutually exclusive. Well, they're not mutually inclusive either, because you'll need your refracted values based on R in order to derive the second horizon that we don't see. That would be the geometric horizon. Well, that value gives you R. That's R, in an essence, part of your refracted value. So when you say they're not mutually exclusive, no, you depend on being able to see a geometric horizon to measure it, to derive R. But if you can't, paradoxically, you can't then get a refraction value to refract it into a non-geometric position. But when you refract it into a non-geometric position, it's no longer geometric. That's the point. Thank you for your comments all the same, Phil.
Phil's caught up in the paradox. He can't get out of it again.
Here's the paradox on screen right now. So this is Andrew Thomas Young's description. And if you read along the top, it says, we've drawn a... Who's making that bloody row? I bet it's Neil.
It is.
Sorry.
Just mute. Just your crappy, horrible mic dragging all over everything. Not only does it drag over everything,
I
make a
was
horrible
on
noise.
mute.
Yeah, but you're... Okay, so Andrew Thomas Young's diagram. And he says, we have drawn a line of sight to the geometric horizon, right? So a line of sight to the apparent horizon as the straight line OG. So the two words in there that are important, 3 if you include straight line, all right? Apparent, that means you can see it. Line of sight, that means you've got a line of sight to it. Well, that's the line OG. Well, paradoxically, this whole diagram is to explain why you don't see G. Why what you actually see is OH, a bent line. For all you fundies telling us how you can have a straight line of sight, unfortunately not. Andrew Thomas Young goes out of his way to explain how you can paradoxically have a line of sight to something that's refracted to point H. You haven't got a line of sight to it, have you? You need one because the line from G to the centre gives you your radius. It's Al-Biruni's dip measurement with a straight line of sight to a geometric tangent point at G. That Andrew Thomas Young's explaining why we can't see it. The actual line of sight, according to this diagram, is OH to a refracted horizon. We only have one horizon. You can't see two. So therefore, you do not have, as described here, a line of sight to OG. This dotted line isn't visible. You don't have a line of sight to it. So that's their paradox.
I mean, they've said it. It only exists in the maths. So Andrew Thomas Young is really just pushing a thought experiment here.
He's pushing two horizons. He's saying you've got a line of sight to a geometric horizon and a line of sight to a refracted non-geometric horizon. According to him, line of sight OG and line of sight OH. Two horizons. We only have one. The horizon in the begging the question, proof of nothing perspective hijacking Earth curve maths is OG. A straight line of sight to a physical obstruction known as Earth curve. Debunked by this very diagram. Paradoxically using a refraction rate that's based on G to the centre point of a sphere Earth. That's R. Radius. Can't get it if you can't see it.
But that's my point, Nathan. Since it doesn't exist and they must prove somehow to themselves and to others we live on the dingleberry, it's a thought experiment and only exists in the maths.
Gonna allow a bit of begging the question to them to pretend that when you see these black swan images, that H is the point where the horizon is, even though it's further away and past the geometric obstruction. Even still there, they're reifying the horizon as H, as the leading edge. It's just further away, but it's still caused by the geometry, which is why the black swans are devastating, because that black swan takes the geometry for an R value from 3959 to 250,000. If you allow them to beg that question a little bit and apply it to a picture, to reify the horizon there with 7/6R, it still means that R value is astronomical.
Adam, did you mean 40,000 and that the circumference would be 250,000?
No.
I thought it was 40,000 radius with the black swan at 10 miles out.
No, the black swan takes it to 250, doesn't it?
Yeah, 250.
I stand corrected. I can't.
No, it is. No, you're correct. It's 250. I've got to expand on this because you've honed in on it without enough detail. So what Adam's describing is the orbital path of the moon in the heliocentric model. So if you imagine that thought experiment where you hold up an apple and then get somebody with a golf ball to step away, probably 30 paces, maybe even more, quite some distance, and hold not a golf ball, maybe a pea, and they go, right, that's the comparison of the distance between Earth in the heliocentric model and the Moon in the heliocentric model. Now, if you went another couple of steps and then made the apple now effectively the size of a car parking lot, that would be the circumference of Earth if you based the horizon measurement in the Black Swan on an R derivation. That would be the size of Earth beyond the orbital path in the heliocentric model of the Moon. That's how big Earth would blow up to be if the horizon was still being reified into a geometric limitation in the Black Swan imagery. Beyond 250,000, I think it is, just as opposed to the Moon, which is just under in the heliocentric model.
But that's see, and that's allowing them 7/6R, but they don't face up to that point that even if you allow them to beg that question and you give them that bit of math, it's still so far and still fundamental within their claim of 7/6R is it's still part of the geometry that's causing the horizon. It's still a piece further back that renders flat, but it's still a physical obstruction. So if you extrapolate that out, that's how ridiculous a picture like the Black Swan turns the maths into.
To put it more succinctly, we have debunked Earth curve. An Earth curve is a fundamental premise of being on a sphere. It's the horizon in your model, or it was, until we debunked it in 2020. Now it's not. Lumpy Gas and a Vacuum, thank you very much for the super chat. Thanks for thanking me. It says thanks, Nathan. And panel, I'll add to that, but thank you for the super chat.
Well, isn't that going to bring in a host of problems since they can, well, they have to change everything about their heliocentric model if the radius of the supposed ball is not 3959. Everything changes.
Not exactly.
Nothing
yes and
works.
no. They can't change anything in that regard. So yes, they can scale it differently, but they can't change what they've reverse engineered into being an R value. It works with the angle measurements to Polaris. Well, they won't change, will they? But beyond that, you could potentially change the scaling values in Kepler's third law when you get the maths for distances to the sun, and they have changed in recent history. So we know they can change the scaling values.
Yeah, but how does that affect all their calculations?
It doesn't. You can put up, if you, at the moment, Venus is assumed to be Earth's twin, therefore have Earth's radius. But you could change that value very easily, couldn't you?
Well, didn't we have this discussion yesterday where we just changed the model, that lady said?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If something's anomalous, you can just say, all right, well, we'll just change one of these scaling values. It doesn't actually affect anything because you can label the distances of whatever you like. Once you've figured out the motions, then you just have to apply the mathematics with a scaling value. If you don't know how far or how big Venus is, you've just got to make it up. Well, but you can make it up at any value and still apply Kepler's third law of interplanetary motion to derive the scaling values. Therefore, it actually matters not how far the sun is. It could be as close or as far as you like. Like in 1984. The sun can be close, it can be far away, whatever our mathematicians decide.
Didn't they do that with the orbit? When the so-called orbit, they had it as a perfect circular orbit, didn't they, at one point? And then they ran into some trouble and they had to change it into not such a spherical orbit to compensate for another problem that they come across. So, yeah, they're just always changing things and altering things to suit the so-called model.
Exactly. Shout out to Retro Bill. It says, hard to believe Eratosthenes is still the most common globe proof cited by normies when I speak to them, or whom I speak. Yeah, Retro Bill. Hopefully you point out that that's a flat Earth angle measurement. I hope so, because that measurement proves a flat Earth. Shout out to Godzilla37, who's thanking Neil. I'll thank Neil for you as well, Godzilla. And thanks for the super chat, both you, Retro Bill and Godzilla. Really appreciate the support. Thank you very much.
Well, let me tighten my argument a little bit. So it must match celestial navigation because we use the stars and sun and so forth for navigation. And you got to have a 90, and the furthest distance from 0 to 90 at 60 nautical miles is 5,400 nautical miles. So if the Earth is much bigger, that destroys everything.
The Earth can't be bigger.
Right. So it's over for them because the black swan shows what? Many Earths. I mean, one is 10 miles out, one is 20 miles out. We got many black swans. The Earth keeps growing in size.
Right. You can't go beyond the physical limitation of a hill in the way. So if you've got a foggy day and you've got a geometric measurable hill between you and something in the distance can be reduced. You can have poor weather, so you can't even see the hill on a given day. But it'll never be the case that the hill is beyond where it's supposed to be. Well, the hill in Earth curve terms is the horizon. That's the hill that's geometrically claimed to block your view. And it wouldn't matter how clear a day you get. Makes no difference. It's a geometric limitation to your view. So you can't have it beyond the thing it's supposed to block. That's like waking up one day, looking out your window at the hill, and going, my God, the hill's behind the stuff it used to block. It's just not, that's not physically possible.
It's like the horizon, though. If you look at the word horizon, horizontal, and the sun, they used to call the sun Horus, and they used to need to know where Horus was. Horus is the hour of the day, and they used to work out the hour of the day by measuring the angle of the sun from sunrise on the sea level. And it was measuring angles then to give us the time of where Horus was, horizon. So at 0 to 30 degrees, that in the daytime would correspond to, say, between 6 and 8 o'clock. And then from 30 to 90, 60 degrees, that would give you another hourly rate. So they've always used angles, and you need a flat baseline for that angle. So they've always used the sun and a level baseline, even for working out the time at the beginning of time.
Horus.
Horus, yeah.
It's just the way you're saying it, like Norris. You're saying Horace.
Yeah, It must be the Manchester accent coming out.
Yeah, I'm being hypercritical. Indeed, excellent knowledge. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
It's over there for now.
It is. Moving on. No, seriously. We're talking about angle measurements, right? Getting distances when we're travelling along the ground. And how we need parallel lines to the sky. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the flat sky, in order to measure the angle and figure out how close to the horizon it is. But surely that would leave us with a height, would it not? Someone's at my door.
Not really.
Can you take over, 10th, just for a second?
10th.
Yes, obviously, you had to take a phone call. So in celestial navigation, at least from the books, height doesn't matter. So they leave that out conveniently. So they just want the angle using a flat baseline for the GP of the sun somewhere over the earth. And then the GP of the observer is the zenith position of the observer. So both the sun and the observer have a zenith position on this earth. You can't have diverging zeniths on the globe work because they can never get an angle. So they're talking two sides out of their mouth there.
That's why it's come down to, I think the discussion and the arguments got quite simplified. If you're even using Eratosthenes, Alberuni, and the sextant, it all just comes down to using angle measurements on the physical surface of the Earth and obtaining large distances of that baseline, which all require an angle, which is two straight lines. And that's how simple it's become, really.
Speaking of which, any evidence of axial rotation, Earth-based variety?
Stars move 15 degrees an hour drift.
So the stars are moving.
Yeah, not actual. I said 15 degrees an hour drift. That's not actual deflection.
Right, but the question is, any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety? The Earth is not moving. Is there any evidence of the Earth moving?
No, that's the claim, isn't it?
Yeah.
The claim is the 15 degrees an hour, not actual deflection of the stars, isn't the stars moving, it's the Earth moving on an axis.
Hold on, Nathan. Are you saying the Earth rotates?
On an axis at 15 degrees an hour. I'm not saying it, no. As before, I am not a globe believer. But that is the claim. The claim is that motion, that's Coriolis deflection. That's Earth turning beneath the stars. 15 degrees an hour drift. Earth as a non-inertial turning reference frame. The stars in the inertial reference frame. The apparent deflection appearing as a circular motion in the sky. That's not actual deflection, that's Coriolis drift as a result of Earth turning beneath them.
So then you're describing drift because the Earth is turning, correct?
It's not actual deflection. The stars aren't really moving, although in a different setting, in a different reference frame, you could describe them as moving just to add confusion. But ultimately, what we see in the motion is only as a result of Earth turning beneath them. That's Coriolis deflection. They're not moving, we are.
Right. So then drift is what you're saying is going to happen because we're moving, correct?
That's what it's called. It's called Coriolis drift.
Okay. So what about a hot air balloon or an airplane? Anything?
They don't exhibit the effect. They're not happening. That's not happening to them because reasons.
Because reasons?
Yeah.
Can you get one?
Because when the hot air balloon leaves the surface that's non-inertial and should exhibit drift, what actually happens is the watching of not actual drift is now going to transpose itself into actual deflection of the hot air balloon, and how the air moving with a sphere Earth, I assume, has Earth moving with it, violating the first law of thermodynamics, is actually exhibiting no effect to see, and that's perfectly reasonable. It's called it's called the conservation of angular momentum.
This is fun. So you have drift when you want it and no drift when you want it. So you have both sides of the argument.
That's correct. If I need to example drift in any way, shape or form, I can point at a gyroscope, a bullet, a football, or the stars, and say the Earth is turning and we're turning underneath bullets, we're turning under footballs, we're turning underneath the stars. And if simultaneously you point out that we're not turning underneath aeroplanes, not turning underneath hot air balloons, and not turning underneath drones, I'll say it's because those specific examples violate the first law of thermodynamics. That's correct. I will have my cake and eat it.
That's funny. Awesome. You want the rest of the questions, or you want me to keep asking?
I don't mind either way. You decide, as you've done such a good job, I assume, while I was bringing an Amazon delivery in.
Well, it's up to you. I can go if you want.
Yeah, why not?
All right. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of cosmology, astronomy, or astrophysics?
Got plenty of phenomena.
Yeah.
Those stars drifting, that's a phenomena. And I've got science that says it's as a cause of Earth turn. You know, if you use a gyroscope, which is spinning in a fixed frame of reference and doesn't move outside of that spinning frame, if you stick it on Earth, because Earth's turning, you'll see that the gyroscope drifts at 15 degrees an hour as a result of the motion of Earth underneath the spinning gyro. So the gyro keeps spinning in its same axis, in the same position, but the cage attached to Earth makes it look like it's drifting, i.e. the gyro's drifting. It's moving in the cage. That's actually because Earth is turning underneath as a second reference frame to the gyroscope, which is in the inertial reference frame. Same as your bullet and your football and the stars.
Have you run this through the scientific method, or is it just stops at the observation?
It's called an experiment by a man called Foucault. So, I mean, what more do you need?
Oh, okay. So why does that satisfy the necessity of an experiment? Do you know what a hypothesis is? Do you know what IV, DV, CVs are? Did he do all that?
Yeah, he's got all of that.
Can you explain it to me, please? What did he vary?
I've already gone through it, but I'll happily go through it again. You spin up what looks like a spinning top. Or if you imagine a bicycle wheel that you spin up and perch on your finger, you can tilt your arm, you can tilt it left and right, but the bicycle wheel still spins, right? In the same plane. It doesn't tilt itself because it's spinning. It's got gyroscopic motion. Well, you do that on a smaller scale with a smaller gyro that you can get going much faster. and then you plonk it on anywhere on Earth. And, you know, basically the cause of the drift in the gyro is because Earth turns underneath. So you've got your cause and effect relationship established there, proven by the gyros drifting. What more do you need? That's science, right?
How about a demonstration of that actually happening?
Yeah, we had some. Bob Nodell showed in a fibre optic gyroscope that once it's spun up, it demonstrated a 15 degrees an hour drift. That's the Earth moving underneath the fixed spinning frame of the optical gyroscope, to the tune of the cage moving at 15 degrees an hour in line with the Earth turning at 15 degrees an hour.
I didn't know he was standing on the North Pole when he was doing that.
It doesn't have to be. It can be anywhere on Earth.
Yeah, he would.
Is the gyro a man-made thing or naturally occurring in nature?
The deviation at 15 degrees an hour as a result of Earth turning underneath is very much a natural effect of Earth turning.
So then what would you have to manipulate to find out if that's true? Wouldn't it be the Earth itself, not a gyro, man-made object?
I can do either. I choose to just vary the gyro though, 'cause it's easier.
You can do either.
No, I can't vary the presumed cause of the effect. My assumed cause, if I'm going to call it science, even though I've got no natural phenomena beyond the stars, is that Earth's turning beneath. Well, if that's the IV independent variable cause of the effect being deviation at 15 degrees an hour, not actual deflection, Coriolis effect, well then I've got to be able to vary that which I assume causes the effect. To be an independent variable, you've got to be real. So Earth turn, real? Well, you might be assuming it, so let's just move on to the next, which is that you've got to have it as your independent variable in your hypothesis. Yeah, I can qualify that. Yeah, Earth turn, independent variable. Yeah, I've done that, I've covered that. What about the last, which is to be able to vary and manipulate it as a researcher? Can I vary and manipulate Earth turning as a presumed cause of this effect? 15 degrees an hour drift in a gyro, definitely not phenomena you observe in nature. No, I can't. I can't vary Earth turn. I can't vary the presumed cause of the effect to validate it scientifically. 99 people, come on, one more, 100 watching, woohoo! Shout out to all of you who shared the show. That's the only reason there's 100 people watching, so thank you very much of all of you who are regulars that do smash the share button. But if you've just joined us, a very warm welcome to you. Glad to have you. Please smash the subscribe button and share button. That's why you're here. You've seen someone sharing the show, no doubt. But yeah, thank you very much. Please share the show.
Moving on, any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the center of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Let's ask the mob.
No, they've only dug down 12k.
That's what you think.
All right. Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Question to my brother, and he refused to answer it. Atmosphere is different, don't you know?
Atmo, air, sphere. Air doesn't take the shape of a sphere, so when someone says atmosphere is different, well, it's an oxymoron.
That's correct, and that's what I said, and he refused to engage. He still swears that Bezos is bringing people up to see Earth curves.
Is Bezos the one involved with Amber Heard or the one with a penis logo? Which one's Bezos again?
Penis logo.
The penis rocket man.
He's the one with the feather.
Yes.
They're laughing at you. If you're watching that guy, right, he's got dick subliminals all over his shit. I mean, they're just laughing at you.
Yeah, but what is he? When he takes them up, what are they seeing? They're not seeing anything.
But I would love to do that. Of all the things I would love to do before I die on my bucket list, getting up as high as you possibly can would be one of my desires. Not because I in any way think that the black area is a sky vacuum. It isn't. Man just covered that in the housekeeping question. Wouldn't you? It's one of those things I remember. It's part of my, like, when people interview me about how I came to this subject, I tell them about how I was on backs of planes looking out the back window, the emergency exit window, because there's no seats around it, and you can get a really good angle, even though it's a tiny window, on the world below you. And I remember thinking, God, I wish I could go higher. And one of the reasons I thought I wish I could go higher was because I was a reasonably well-educated heliocentrist and was under the understanding that from a commercial height, commercial airliner height, you couldn't see Earth curving. That would be the horizon, the physical limitation to your view, Earth curve, that you couldn't see it bending, i.e. becoming the sphere below you, until you got much, much higher. And even then you'd only see it to a very small degree. But I still wanted to see it. So when you have Math Powerland saying Earth's flat, you suddenly have all these memories of going, oh yeah, what was it they said about why I couldn't see Earth as a sphere again? What was their excuse for not seeing it? Oh, because you're not high enough. Meanwhile, we'll calculate it at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet and claim it's blocking boats and buildings.
Yeah, that's a joke. And let me ask you a question. What do you call that when people are just arguing from one side and not looking at both sides? Isn't it ignorance?
Zealotry?
When I went up in a plane, though, the first thing I thought of was, how could Earth be a sphere? Because I was just looking at flat land and flat ocean.
I was bad. I was like, where the hell is the damn curve? As a kid. Like, why don't I see this curve, man? That sucks. All
Yeah,
excited.
but it didn't shock you how flat everything was, though?
That's
It
what
was
he's
more
saying.
shocking to me how incredibly not drifting we were. That's what I noticed the first thing.
That's what Chocolate is saying. Chocolate paid for it.
About drifting.
Chocolate,
We're not supposed to drift. We're supposed to observe things drifting. We're not supposed to notice that we're turning. That's why it's used with Coriolis. So when, again, you've got to wrap your head around, I think it was Brian that was asking about this last. Why is it called non-inertial, the turning reference frame? If you're on a roundabout watching a ball tossed between two people over the top of it, what you're looking at in the ball, is it looking like it's curving? Because you're spinning, right? That's the effect we're talking about. Why would you describe that as being observed from a non-inertial reference frame? Well, let me explain how it's a non-inertial reference frame first. If you're on the roundabout and you look down, so you put your hands either side of your head so you've got tunnel vision, and you look down at the floorboards, what you see is nothing happening. You and what you are standing on are as one. There's no movement. Yeah? Now, you have to have that as your frame of reference in order to describe the ball curving. Why? Because the ball isn't curving. So to describe the inertial effect of the ball curving, you have to describe that motion, actually your motion, in an object that has no motion applicable to it. So there's no curve in the ball when you watch it spinning underneath it from a roundabout. But to describe it, you have to describe it like you're not moving and it is taking the motion you're observing. So you observe it curve, it's an apparent curve, but it's not really doing it. So in physical terms, you can't describe it ever as having a curved path because it doesn't. You're the one moving, but what you're seeing is the effect of your movement, but with the understanding that you're not actually moving at all. Hence the effect of the curve. Hence the description as non-inertial. Not as good as Paula's explanation to me, but as good as I can muster on the spot.
Also, if the Earth was a ball and pilots were flying, we all know about they'd have to adjust for the curvature and dip down. Now, you wouldn't, if the Earth was a ball, you wouldn't expect a pilot to do that. There'd be a piece of equipment on the aircraft that would do that automatically, and there isn't.
Well, they treat Earth as flat, and there's a good reason for that. Because if they didn't, what you've effectively got is more space ahead of you, dropping away from you. Well, if you have that misapprehension that the ground is not flat and in fact falls away, that means the ground ahead of you is getting out of your way at 8 inches per mile squared. That means you've got more space to fly in. So if you take that as read and start going, well, beyond that horizon, there's an extra cavity that I can fly in. Well, no, there isn't. If you take that as the case, then you're going to crash into the ground. So no, they absolutely do not treat it as anything other than a flat plane when they fly above it. Because if they did, they'd consider there being more space to fly than there actually is.
I think I think by now somebody, whether accidentally or purposely, would have said, you know what, I'm just going to try to fly off into space and just keep it level. Right? Because if you keep it level or straight, the ball's going to fly, it's going to drop away from you, and you're going to end up in outer space at some point.
Right.
I don't know how that hasn't happened yet, but
exactly.
I was on a plane. I was on a plane going to a golf tournament, and it was a private plane with the golfer and so forth. And the pilot went up to 23,000 feet, and as soon as he got there, it was level flight, and he said on autopilot. And I started asking him these questions. I go, so you obviously can talk now, because he asked us not to bother him until he gave us the clearance to talk. And we all had headsets on and so forth. So I'm in the back looking at his instrument panel, and I see that the wings are level with the horizon. And so I'm seeing level flight. And if you poured me a drink in a plastic cup, I'd see the water being level, just like we experience on an airplane when they say, okay, now you can order a drink because we're at level flight. So then for the time duration until he took it off autopilot, it stayed at that altitude, and we were flying straight. So there's no going into space, any of this stuff, because it's not what they say it is.
you are now free to move about the cabin.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, Chocolate, you paid for an e-ticket ride on an airplane, and you still didn't see the curve.
Is there any evidence of the R value? I don't think we covered that in housekeeping.
No, I was going to go next. So let's go with that one then. Any evidence of Earth radius, the R value?
No, we debunked it. 2020. We also now have moved on beyond debunking their claim of radius on a self-perpetuating molten iron core-based sphere Earth, and moved beyond it to how they got their R value, which we debunked with the Black Swan, and it came from a flat plane.
Wouldn't that be sufficient enough to destroy the globe model when you destroy its R value?
More than that, it proves we're on a plane. We debunked it in 2020. The Earth curve is a necessity. It's a natural consequence of Earth being a sphere with a geometric limitation to your view. That's what they use to claim it with their maths. Well, the moment you show that it isn't, there is no longer a physical limitation to your view at the horizon known as Earth curve, then there isn't any Earth curve anymore. What's that you say? Oh, we wouldn't expect to see it from 40,000 feet. No, the horizon's not Earth curve. Doesn't matter how high you go, Earth's never going to go into a big ball shape.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Which one?
I'll let the audience answer that one.
Does mass not attract mass? Is that not a natural phenomenon we observe? Gas go down, go boom, boom, right? It's attracted to the mass of Earth.
What's mass?
I don't know. You tell me, you define it. It's your claim suddenly. I haven't got to define this. Blah, blah, blah.
Well, how many types of gravity are there now?
2.
So Newtonian and Einsteinian?
Yes. 3 space and 4 space.
When I explained this to my brother, he had no clue that in higher education, that's when you get taught it's the bending of a concept.
Did he go through higher education?
He's self-taught, so I don't know if he even
Well, no, then he wouldn't know. How would he?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's arguing in ignorance, not even hearing anything from outside.
That's where Anthony's as well, because Anthony's essentially going out, and if you want to look at it from one perspective, he's talking about how the current rhetoric of gravity is Einsteinian, taught to people in higher education to get their qualification, to go and teach 107-year out-of-date mass-attracting mass when they've just literally been taught how gravity is not a force and how the conceptual medium, known as pseudo-Riemannian force space-time, is bending as a result of the uneven distribution of mass. That's what they learn at a higher education level. So then they just ignore it all and go and teach the curriculum that mass attracts mass. Falsely ascribed to Newton, actually C.V. Boy's Reverend John Michell and Cavendish gravity.
Nathan, in most other disciplines, when someone is presuming a cause of something and later find out that that was false and the true cause is established, do they continue teaching the false cause for over 107 years?
That hasn't happened with gravity. They haven't even gotten a phenomena anymore. They used to claim a phenomena. Mass attracting mass is a phenomena that just doesn't happen. It's defied by gas law and gas behaviour. Gas has mass in their claim of their description of what it is, even though when you actually ask them, you get an equivocation between mole and inertia. But either way, they think it has mass. And whatever mass may be, they're claiming that that goes down. But gas doesn't behave that way. It was violated 107 years ago and replaced by Einsteinian pseudo-force space, a conceptual medium known as space-time. Length, breadth, depth and time. Well, that replacement means there is no phenomena anymore. There's a description in a mathematical pseudo-force space.
Again, my question was more of when you find out it isn't something, but it's something else, do they teach the isn't something for 107 years? Or is that
Right,
done
I see
on
what you're
purpose?
saying. You're saying when they find out that phlogiston isn't real, do they still go on to teach it at primary school level? No, they don't. It's absurd.
So, right, so why are they doing it?
Because they need you to be under the misapprehension that mass does attract mass. So when you're asked why the gas would not fill the availability of volume, i.e. space, a sky vacuum, 10 to the minus 17 torr, you'll hark back to your very primitive education in this regard when you were very young and think, nah, gravity sorts that out. That's not a problem. The gas comes down, and if you look it up, you'll see gas described as atmosphere, and a whole bunch of laws applied to the paradoxically sphere-shaped air when air takes the shape of its container. It doesn't take a sphere shape, but they'll describe these ever-increasing volumes of homogeneous sphere-y layers that go up and up and up until you reach the Kármán line. And then suddenly gas stops behaving as gas does. Just reaches the Kármán line and goes, you know what, I've had enough. I'm not going to continue at a high rate in whatever direction I'm going. I'm just going to chill out here at the Kármán line. Maybe go back down so that they can achieve yummy gas pressure to breathe down on Earth. Obviously, I'm now moving at a vaster rate than I was when I left the ground because I'm keeping up with the ground below, so there's no effect in Coriolis. I mean, I'm doing all kinds of crazy shit at the Kármán line, says gas, when it's sentient.
Well, what do you want? What do you want from rebellious gas particles? I mean, they do what they want.
They're there at the Kármán line burning their bras in defiance of natural law. Yeah, that's right, Chocolate.
Well, we're at 44 past the hour. One last question.
There's
Any
one
evidence?
bit to add.
Go on.
Only to come back to I get very discombobulated when Nathan's playing bit all this. It throws me off. I don't know what to do. On that point, there is the point that if you are going to pretend that somehow a gas particle is like a theoretical space rocket and needs an escape velocity, and that suddenly as it goes higher, gravity does pull and slow the particle down, so it does finally turn around. There isn't a point, as far as I can see, where you could apply that with thermodynamics or any parts of bloody phone. So, any parts of how gas behavior actually works and how temperature relates to and how molecular speed relates to it and what zero speed for a gas particle would mean, which would be being at absolute zero. Now, to turn around, there has to be a point of absolute zero so that the can go back the other way. There has to be a 0 point, which is an impossibility in gas behavior. So to fit in to their model, they have to again deny further natural laws of gas behavior. subtle nuance, but there is that turning point would mean zero energy point, wouldn't it?
I think
Right.
what you're describing is that if you're false in one, all the other things break down. So obviously, they're assuming we are on the globe, we're in an open system next to a vacuum of space, and somehow these gas particles are protesting at a certain height if they're sentient. It all falls apart if you're wrong on the premise that you're on the globe next to a vacuum.
It started with a particular premise, didn't it? What Adam said was, you have to start with the assumption that the gas would require or have be necessitated to escape, and he described it as achieving escape velocity. Well, escape from what? The fact that they're falling in an orbit by assumption?
But they're being pulled in. The theory of a rocket is that the force of the gravity that's why you have to go so fast to escape past that, otherwise it'll just pull you back.
There we go. There it is. There it is. So, okay. So what we've got in terms of the comparison is a force that has to be overcome, right, Adam? Bit like Newtonian forces of gravity that would need to be overcome, right?
Yeah.
Is gravity, in the truest sense of the current understanding, a force?
No. But you can think of it as one.
I don't want to think about it. I'm just being matter of fact.
Then no.
So the bending of a conceptual medium known as space-time, that's not a force.
No, it's just...
Yeah, that word conceptual just messes that all up.
But do the rockets have to escape a conceptual medium?
No.
So what force are we talking about then?
We're no longer talking about a force if we go to Einstein, and we're talking about, this is not my geodesics and how we have to get away from the bending straight line.
No, well, fair enough. Let's not concern ourselves too much with geodesics in space-time then. And let's concern ourselves with the more colloquial understanding of what that means, right? So when we're measuring the force, because there is still definitely a force on Earth, how would we measure that force?
Torsion bar twist.
You're going to need the fabric. The
So-
fabric to bend the space-time.
Torsion bar twist we can come back to. Good answer. But would it not be weight?
No, because I've got to assume gravity too.
What, within weight?
Yeah.
Well, let's do that. Let's just assume it as a force, right? You said we can think of it as a force. So if we now think of it as a force, is it a downward vector at 9.8 meters per second squared by any chance? Just so I can think of it that way.
It could be expressed like that as an approximation within Newtonian.
So we're back to 107-year out-of-date rhetoric.
Yeah.
But isn't
It's not
Einsteinian?
expressed. Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, isn't Einsteinian that 9.8 meters actually the Earth going up?
Yeah, but we've moved away from that because we didn't want to cover geodesics in space-time in terms of the motion through fourth-dimensional space-time of Earth in a geodesic manner. That would be a curved path.
Well, I'm just bringing it up because in the new gravity, it's the Earth going up that gives a 9.8, and then the one that Newton did is coming down with a force. So it can't be both.
And just to
I don't think
back up Tim
Einstein
on this,
literally
it's
said-
not.
Wow.
Before people think that it's some flat Earth nonsense, right? Flat Earth society nonsense with the Earth rising up. Check out your heliocentric priest Brian Cox, who actually agrees that that's what Einstein is saying. That the apple didn't fall to the Earth. The Earth actually went up to meet the apple.
Yeah,
Straight from the horse's mouth.
I was about to go into exactly that with Arwin, because Arwin was about to say, I assume, he might now deny it. Well, Einstein didn't literally say the Earth was meeting the apple, did he? Yeah, he did.
Doesn't he say?
No, but that's just based on relativism. It's just like, oh, it's all relative, so I can think of it as if the Earth is moving towards the apple, just as the other way around, because it doesn't really matter. It's just Einstein screwing around with this mathematical conception.
That's correct. That's correct.
The maths doesn't distinguish which is. It calculates. I could be wrong, but it doesn't distinguish which way. It could be either for the maths. The maths, it doesn't matter, I don't think, which is going. It's relative, isn't it? So within the mathematics, it could be one, it could be the other, but the maths doesn't make a distinguishment, I think.
The mathematics do, yes. It's an inertial vector.
So what was the stumbling point with Newton's gravity?
Mass doesn't attract mass. Mass doesn't attract mass.
Yeah, but yeah, all right. So they've realised that then. That's why
you're giving a nice segue to the guy who said Cavendish earlier.
I've not heard balls in a shed for a long time.
Yeah, I smiled at that one too. It's been a while.
Well, that is the assertion that mass is being demonstrated as attracting mass. So that the torsion bar twist that you're measuring is as a result of those two sets of balls moving towards one another, i.e. they're being attracted to one another. That is very much claimed to be a demonstration of mass attracting mass. That's what Cavendish is. However, what you're observing is happening in the apparatus as opposed to being studied as a result of seeing it happen in nature. So there's no natural phenomena. It's being conjured within the apparatus. So to say mass attracts mass, that's an assertion of something occurring. But if you just decide that that's the case and then move forward to figure out why, well, hold on, does it actually happen? Does mass actually attract mass? Well, if you've got a claim to be enormous mass, that would be Earth as a sphere, will that attract the mass of a gas particle? Well, you would think so if mass attracts mass. But it doesn't. Gas moves in all vectors, not down at 9.8 meters per second squared. However, a solid moving through the medium of air will. But that's what we call weight. They just take weight and insert an introduction, then a removal of a force called gravity.
Well, the whole issue with mass attracting mass is that even if it was real, which it isn't, then it still wouldn't counteract the gas ability to expand in all directions every time, right? Yeah. Even how's that mass attracting mass going to keep that together? It's still going to expand in all directions despite.
Or to put it another way, the notion of mass attracting mass is a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. It's a reversal of entropy.
And if gas is leaving the Earth to start with, and mass was attracting mass, it would never leave the Earth, would it?
That's why they use it. Yeah, that's the full circle assumption, but it violates natural law. But yes, what you're describing as a negative, they actually spin into the positive claim based on you being pre-programmed from a very early age to understand or think of mass attracting mass.
With 5 minutes left, one question left. Any evidence you can have a curved baseline while acquiring an elevation angle?
No, and they'll need that to measure an angle to get an R value to claim the Earth's a sphere. The sphere Earth is based on those angle measurements from a flat plane.
What's an angle again?
I used to keep asking him to show me a curved baseline, and he'd say, "We don't expect a curve. We're not the ones mentioning a curve." I said, "Well, you're the ones who need the curve because you live on a curved Earth."
No, you've got the wrong attitude. I've got to whip this out of the panel and Discord. When someone says, we wouldn't expect to see Earth curve, we wouldn't expect the horizon to block boats and buildings, you don't say, yeah, you would, you're a globe believer, this is how you would expect to see it. Your correct response is, say it with me, welcome to flat Earth.
Welcome to flat Earth.
Welcome to flat Earth.
We wouldn't expect to see it curving. No, not you would expect to see it curving. No, yeah, that's right. We wouldn't expect to see it curving. We agree. Welcome to flat Earth. We did that. This has happened with Coriolis effect. They deny drift and say why we won't expect to see it. How something can leave a non-inertial reference frame and then continue to move with the non-inertial reference frame. So as you watch the drone take off the ground that's spinning, it just carries on moving in the air above the ground that's spinning without any effect to observe. Now you've then got two choices. Either correct the globe claimant on their misapprehension of what the globe claims. No, Mr. Glober, you should be saying Earth turns underneath the drone. Why are you telling them what they should be claiming? Just welcome them to non-rotating Earth. So you're saying there's no Coriolis to see? Earth's not turning under the drone for us to see 15 degrees an hour. Thanks, Bob. All right. Well, welcome to non-rotating Earth. Glad to know you're not claiming there's Coriolis drift then. Go on.
Sorry. The lack of evidence that it's happening is the proof that it's happening. Come on.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? Well, the fact that I can explain away why we're not seeing Coriolis drift is proof we spin, because I said we spin at the beginning of explaining away why we don't see it. No, we just don't see Coriolis effect. We're supposed to if we're turning, according to your claim of a globe Earth. There's claimed to be Coriolis effect. There isn't. But no, elevation angle 10th, no. Curve baseline, no.
No, yeah. And to Chocolate's question, it takes two lines, obviously straight, meeting at a vertex, a common point, to get an angle.
Two straight lines? Well, that's weird, because you asked about a curved baseline. That's pretty different, right? Curve doesn't mean straight, right?
That's why they can't get an angle from a curved baseline.
Thanks.
Well, that concludes the housekeeping questions.
Perfect. Any last remarks? No. With that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering Streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the thanks button, smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a member, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Premiering Stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!